October 27, 2023 marks the day the EA UFC franchise released the 5th installment of the EA UFC games, EA Sports UFC 5. A year later into the game cycle, and the rumors of the next installment of the franchise get stronger each day it goes by. Speculations for the next EA UFC title are rising and at an all-time high. Assuming that next title is EA Sports UFC 6, the game needs to play and feel like something we haven't experienced before. A similar jump between titles like EA Sports UFC 1 to EA Sports UFC 2 and then EA Sports UFC 3. When you play those titles alone, the fundamentals are exactly the same, but each game feels different. And that's what the jump between UFC 5 and UFC 6 needs to be like. It needs to be significantly different. But the story wasn't always like this. At some point, this franchise was thriving, having some of the biggest content creators outside of the UFC community creating content for the UFC games consistently just because they enjoy these games, and so did their audience. But how do we get back to such point? This video will be divided by sections where I go in depth about gameplay mechanics that need improvement to get back to such point and to make the EA UFC franchise great once again. Let's begin with the stand-up, which will have 3 different segments: footwork, strikes, and meters. Everything starts from the ground up, and so does footwork. The footwork system on EA Sports UFC 5 is one of those areas the game lacks the most, as every fighter seems to be sliding or skating when moving around inside the octagon. Fixing this issue alone will make the game feel more realistic and make the game more simulation than arcadey. There's 2 systems that can fix this problem, and one of them has already been used on an EA UFC game before. Number 1, the footwork system from UFC Undisputed 3, where fighters have their foot planted to the canvas, so when they move around inside the octagon, it doesn't look like they're skating around, making movement look more natural, causing the game to be more realistic. And number 2, the footwork system from EA Sports UFC 1, a system that was created by EA Sports themselves to prevent these skating problems. This system is the perfect solution for this problem, as it's a system created by EA themselves and something they already have used before. The reality is, EA Sports UFC 6 can't afford to look or move the same as previous installments, or the game will suffer big time. For strikes, effectiveness and uniqueness are key. UFC Undisputed 3 is a game that rewards precision and perfect strikes. Landing the perfect strike with good timing and precision on UFC Undisputed 3 will most likely end up with a knockout, or at the very least a knockdown. And that's something the EA UFC franchise is missing: strike effectiveness. As in UFC 5, very often you will find yourself landing the perfect shots with good timing and precision, not leading to finishes. And that's because the game damage relies too much on meters. More about that later on the video. Perfect strikes need to be rewarded no matter when they're thrown, just as it is in real life. A problem from the EA UFC games even people outside of the community have noticed.
Why is it so difficult to KO somebody or to get KO'd? All right, I've had wars in UFC 5 where I get dropped 10 times, my opponent gets dropped 10 times, and we're still slugging it out. And there's still going to be 5 more knockdowns before one of us finally falls and loses. Even when you're playing as Francis Ngannou, why is it taking so long for Francis Ngannou, the heaviest hitter in the sport, to KO Cyril Gane? Literally, how is he taking this many punches and not out cold? This is a 4-piece clean combination from Ngannou, and Gane gets right back up. If you're playing as or against one of the heaviest punchers in the sport, there should be devastating consequences for when you get hit with their punches, or if you're playing as them, there should be devastating results when you land those punches.
Strike uniqueness ties down to fighter uniqueness, and as I mentioned before, fighter uniqueness is not negotiable. Mixed martial arts is a sport where every single fighter has some type of uniqueness to them, from the way they strike to the way they move everyone is different. And it should be like that on EA Sports UFC 6. The solution for this would be to use advanced technology to capture animations, like Take-Two Interactive does with their NBA 2K games, with something called Pro Play, where NBA 2K takes real-life footage and turns them into animations with Pro Play. Instead of flying every fighter individually to the studio to mocap animations, something like Pro Play will solve this massive problem that is fighter uniqueness. Although UFC 5 has a vulnerability system, the game damage relies too much on meters. Relying on these meters might sound like a good idea on the surface, but it does more harm to the game than good. Having these meters makes the game less realistic and more arcadey, and it also makes people play the UFC games like they're playing Mortal Kombat, where the whole purpose of these fighting games are to drain meters to win matches, and that shouldn't be the case with UFC games. Solution? Let's go back to EA Sports UFC 1, where individual meters didn't exist. Let's go back to the fighter's icon on the corners instead of meters. This will make it so players don't focus so much on breaking meters just to win fights. Grappling is to be more intuitive, as just going left, right, up, and down don't feel immersive enough, as even real UFC fighters seem not to find grappling on UFC 5 exciting. A week ago, I did the lay and pray challenge on UFC 5, where I laid on my opponent for a whole fight to see if I can win the match only with control time. And I was able to accomplish that because I knew how to go left, right, up, and down better than my opponent did. But here's what UFC fighter Trishan Gore commented on that video. I'm one of those people that rage quits, LOL. Majority people get on here to throw hands and feet, not to lay on each other, LOL. In real life, I love jiu-jitsu, but not on the game, LOL. A solution for this problem would be an intuitive grappling system like UFC Undisputed 3, where in order to move to different positions, you have to move the stick accordingly to how the fighters are positioned, making players feel like they have control over grappling while at the same time making it intuitive, which leads to grappling feel more natural and fun. Fighters' ratings should go back to overalls to show how different in skills fighters really are, as the 5-star rating doesn't seem to show this accurate enough. A former champion like Charles do Bronx Oliveira is rated 4.5 star on the lightweight division, and so is Renato Moicano. If you know MMA, you will know that these fighters are on two different levels of being good, and the overall rating system would fix that problem. For creative fighters, there should be a new archetype system where players are freely allowed to create whatever they want, but with limitations so everyone isn't OP. How NBA 2K does their system, where they allow players to create their archetypes freely based on the player's style, but with limitations to make it fair. Custom gloves and custom shorts would also go a long way. That's 3 videos, 3 episodes, me giving you guys my thoughts on what I think the game needs in order to be successful. Again, there's always more, there's always will be more, but that right there was a great start. If you guys enjoyed this video, please drop a like. It really helps out with the algorithm. It was your host King Diaz, and thank you for watching.